Hello everyone. Welcome to you all our lovely mindsetters. Hope you guys are having yourselves a great and fabulous Sunday so far. You are tuned into the History Paper 2 show. We know that you guys are writing tomorrow afternoon and we are here to help you to conquer that exam tomorrow. Now this show is proudly brought to you by MTN SA Foundation and endorsed by the Department of Basic Education. Now I am not alone. Of course we have a lovely studio teacher with us today. Mamsi, how are you?
I'm fine, thanks. How are you, Queen?
I'm well, thanks. So, Mamsi, what do you have to say to the grade 12s for their history paper tomorrow before we start to the show?
Well, the one thing I want to say to them is I hope you are prepared and that what we are going to do today will just enhance what you already know and what you have done. Because it's not good, it's not a good idea to leave things till the last minute.
Yes, that is very true. So I hope you guys are already prepared for tomorrow. We're just here to help you and make sure things are clearer to you. Now, Mamsi is going to be taking us for today and giving us all the information that we need for tomorrow's paper. So let's get on with the show.
Okay, thank you, Queen. So, as Queen has already said, today we'll be looking at History Paper 2 to prepare you for tomorrow's exam. And what we've done is we've selected sources and questions from the Eastern Cape to 2014 paper. So we hopefully will have enough time to look at the different sections that will be asked in tomorrow's paper. And remember that there is a choice in the paper as well. So if I can go here and look at the aim of the lesson is aimed to help you revise the skills to answer the different types of questions in the context of paper 2 topics. So as I said to you before, we've selected different sources and questions from the different sections or different themes that will be examined in paper 2 tomorrow. So before we look at the type of questions you're likely to get in your exam tomorrow, we are going to analyze the source together and then go and look at the questions and the possible responses that you are likely to come up with to answer those questions. Now let's start with our sources. Okay. Now, when you read the sources in history, it is very important to read the caption. Because remember, this caption here, I'm just going to highlight it for you. It tells you what the source is about. So that even before you go on to the source to read the information, you're able to take out the different things that the caption has told you what the source is about. So that is the first step when analyzing your sources. Read the caption. And you will see that at the bottom of this source, there will be a reference as well. That is the information telling you, the learner, where this source was taken from. Now, in terms of answering questions, you will not be expected to use that information. That information is just there to obviously protect the examiner to say they have not plagiarized, they got this particular source from this textbook or this newspaper or wherever they got it. But in terms of analyzing the source and coming up with information that will help you, you need to look at this caption. Now let's read the caption together. It says, this source below consists of a written source and a visual source. So I'm quickly going to underline that so that you know that there are two types of sources that we are dealing with here. It's a written one and a visual one, so obviously they'll be working together. These sources will be working together. One will be giving you the information in written form, and then the other one will be giving that information in visual form, but the information will be similar. So that if later on in the questions, you get a question asking you to look for similarities, you're able to do that. So right from the onset, you need to be looking for those things. And what does the source do, or what is it about? It pays tribute to Biko's contribution. Okay, so we need to underline that Biko made a contribution according to this source, and it's paying tribute to him as well, to Biko's contribution to the liberation of South Africa. So in other words, the source is saying why Steve Biko is such an important person in South African history. So let's start with the written source. This is by Nelson Mandela. Mandela pays tribute to Biko. And he says, living, he was the spark that lit a felt fire across South Africa. Okay, I'm going to highlight that, and that is what you need to do when you are analyzing the source. So he refers to Biko as the spark that lit a fire across South Africa. I'm going to underline across as well, because it shows that his contribution was not just localized in his own area, but it affected the entire country. His message, so he has a message to the youth and students. So this was the message that he gave to young people, was simple and clear. Black is beautiful. Okay, I'm going to use a different color there because these are the principles of what black consciousness was about. Black is beautiful. Be proud of your blackness. So again, you will know from your own learning that black consciousness was about teaching or instilling black pride. So Mandela says the same thing, that Biko's message was, black is beautiful, be proud of your blackness. And with this, he inspired, that's another thing that he did, he inspired our youth to shed themselves of the sense of inferiority. So that goes hand in hand with this black pride. So the problem was that people were feeling inferior, and he was teaching them to be proud of being black. So that is very important. And Nelson Mandela is saying that they had to shed themselves of the sense of inferiority they were born into as a result of more than 3 centuries of white rule. So in other words, it came from a very, very long time. And another thing that Steve Biko did was to assert, he taught young people to assert themselves. So it goes on to say, assert yourself and be self-reliant. Again, you will know from having studied black consciousness that that was one of its aims, that they wanted black people to be independent of white people, to be able to do things on their own. They even have as one of their slogans, black men, you're on your own, meaning don't rely on white people to do things on your own. And you will know that that is how the movement started, because they broke away from the National Union of South African Students to form their own South African Students Organization, because they wanted to prove that they could be on their own. So that is where that comes from. So assert yourself and be self-reliant. We know today that when in the life of a nation, the time comes for an idea, nothing, not even murder, can kill the idea. So again, Nelson Mandela is saying that Steve Biko's ideas did not die with him when he died in 1977, as you already know that. He was focused on how to get our people into action. That's another important thing that I'm going to quickly underline. He was able to inspire people to get into action. In other words, do something about their situation, not to just sit back and accept, the conditions they found themselves in. On how we could achieve freedom. So that was another thing that he did. He showed people different ways of how they could achieve the freedom. Whether his death came from an accidental, not intended blow or not, they had to kill him to prolong the life of apartheid. The very thought of a link between the ANC and the black consciousness movement was unthinkable to the apartheid government. As a courageous leader, that's another thing that Nelson Mandela is saying about Steve Biko, that he was a courageous leader. Biko helped to shape a democratic South Africa. So that is the contribution that he made. He shaped a democratic South Africa. So you've already seen from where we started that he was able to instill black pride. He taught self-reliance, but he didn't just end there. He also was able, through all the things that we've highlighted and underlined, he was able to shape a democratic South Africa. And that was the reason why Nelson Mandela was paying tribute to him. So that was our written source. Now let's look at the visual source. And remember, before we look at the visual source, here is that information I told you about earlier on, that this comes from Biko, a biography by X Mangu. Remember, I told you that that is not the information you'll be using to analyze this source, but you'll be using the caption at the top when it comes to analyzing the source and answering questions. Now, let's quickly look at our visual source and see if it agrees with what is in our written source. So the caption, again, very important. It says the following poster, so you already know that this is a poster. It was created to pay tribute. So this is also an important thing, because we know that in the written source, Nelson Mandela was paying tribute to Biko. Okay, and then the visual source is also paying tribute to him, and this was after his death in 1977. Now let's quickly look at the source and see if there are any visual clues that tell you, if you had not been given the caption, would you have known that Steve Biko was already dead by just looking at this poster? So you need to look at the visual clues, like you can see here that the chains are already broken. That can symbolize two things. It can symbolize the message of the movement, the Black consciousness movement, that it was about breaking the shackles of inferiority that Black people had been living with since, the first years of white rules, because that is what Black consciousness was about. The movement was about instilling Black pride and teaching Black people to stand on their own. So you can see from this poster, this was not by chance, because remember, this poster was created. It wasn't like a photograph that was taken to just capture the moment. So this is very similar to a cartoon. So that is the first visual clue. And then if you look at the words at the bottom of the poster, there's Black People's Convention, tribute to the late. So the late tells you that Steve Biko was normal, because the caption did say that this was made after his death, so they were celebrating him after he had already died. So if you look at those things, they tell you that Steve Biko had already died. If you can go back to the chains, remember I said to you that they can symbolize the breaking of the shackles of inferiority, but another way you can analyze that is to say that it shows that by dying, Steve Biko was then able to break free of apartheid, because in 1977 you will know that there was still apartheid in South Africa. So in other words, he was no longer subjugated or under the apartheid system because he was not alive anymore. So it's very, very important to look for all those visual clues when you're doing your visual analysis, because they tell you what it's about, and also to see if there is a link between these clues and what you're being told in the caption above. Okay, so we've looked at the two sources. Remember, the first one was a written source by Nelson Mandela, and then this one, a visual source paying tribute to Steve Biko. So they were both paying tribute to Steve Biko, but they were doing it in different ways. Okay, so we looked at the fact that Nelson Mandela said Steve Biko was able to inspire young people, instill Black pride, and all the other things that we underlined, teaching them self-reliance and all that. And then here, again, we see it in a different form, that is in a visual form, where he is broken free. We see the chains broken, and then we also know that he was late. So what we're going to do is I'm going to hand over to Queen, and then we are going to take a short commercial break, and after break, we're going to look at the questions based on these two sources. So I hope you will not have forgotten the sources, because we are not going to read them again. Okay, we've analyzed them, so we are going to go straight to the questions when we come back from the break. Over to you, Queen.
All right, guys. Now, before we go for the ad break, guys, remember that our K53 Safe Race competition for the first draw has already closed. We actually closed yesterday midnight. So if you entered maybe a few seconds after, or like maybe a few minutes after midnight, you have been entered into the second draw. So don't worry about that. We still have 3 more draws coming your way. But remember that if you did enter for the first draw, our winner is going to be announced next week, Sunday. So be sure to definitely tune in. Whether you actually want to tune in for the work or not, you guys, you have to tune in, because it's going to be a live draw, and we are giving away, finally, we're giving away that Chevy Spark. So it's very exciting for all of us. So please make sure that you will be tuning in with us, because it's going to be a live draw. That is it from us. Let us take a quick ad break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back, grade 12s. You are still tuned in with us on the History Paper 2 Revision Show. Now, if you just joined us, don't worry, you didn't miss out on too much. I'm sure that you can still catch up. Let's get straight back into it, Mamsi.
Thank you, Queen. Welcome back. Now, remember, before the ad break, we looked at a visual source and a written source, both paying tribute to Steve Biko. Now, let's look at the type of questions you're likely to get in the exam. Now, remember, these are not the exact questions that will be in your paper tomorrow, but we've looked at how you analyze the sources, and then let's look at how you answer questions. Question 1, okay, there's an instruction there. It says a study source 1. We've already studied that. Question 1.1, quote evidence from the source that describes the aims. Okay, I'm quickly going to underline that. It's very important to read your instructions and to know exactly what you're expected to do. In this case, you're expected to quote. So please make sure that you don't put it in your own words, okay, or you use your own knowledge, but you need to extract information from the source because the instruction says quote from the source. So quote evidence from the source that describes the aims of the Black consciousness movement, and it also tells you that the information will be found in the written source. So don't waste time looking for evidence in the visual source because you're told here to look straight at the written source. And another very important thing that you need to take cognizance of is the mark allocation here. It's 3 times 1 equals 3. That means they're expecting you to give 3 different aims of the BCM, the Black Consciousness Movement, as stated in the source, because you are quoting, you are not using your own information or information from your own learning. Because remember, there could be more, or they could have said them in different words in your own textbooks or notes that you got at school. But in this case, you are taking information directly from the source. Okay, now let's look at the likely response. Be proud. Okay, remember I did say that it was about teaching Black pride. Assert yourself, be self-reliant. And they do allow for any other relevant response as long as it comes from the source. So that is a straightforward question. And then the next one, question 2, explain whether you think Mandela's view of Biko can be justified. Okay, I'm going to quickly underline justified. Okay, so now this is where you're analyzing the information in the source and you come up with your own judgment. Do you think that Mandela's view of Steve Biko can be justified? And the likely responses there are both Mandela and Biko were Black people, both fought against apartheid. Both, Biko and the Black consciousness filled the vacuum left by the banned ANC. So that is very, very important. Okay, I'm going to underline the filled the vacuum because it tells you that Nelson Mandela had to pay tribute to him because when the ANC was no longer there, Steve Biko was able to carry on with the struggle. That is why Nelson Mandela said he made a contribution to democratic South Africa. Biko and the Black consciousness kept the struggle alive, is what I've just told you, during the banishment of the ANC and any other relevant response. So that means Nelson Mandela's view of Biko was justified. And they do allow you to argue differently and say, no, it was not justified, but remember you need to give evidence of that. So that is where you're using your skills as an historian after having analyzed the information. So if you decide that his view of Biko was not justified, then you can say things like Mandela was subjective. He did not know Biko very well because there is no time in history where they were together. Because remember, Nelson Mandela was already in jail when the movement came about. Mandela was in prison during the 1970s, I've already told you that, and the BC did not remove apartheid immediately. We know that apartheid did not end in 1968 or in the 70s when the movement was still around, or even 1977 when Steve Biko died. Okay, so there was no link, a direct link between these two leaders, even though they were fighting against the same system. In other words, they did have a common goal, but they were not working closely together. Therefore, that is why you can say Mandela's view was not justified. Now let's move on to the next question, question 3. Comment on the significance of Mandela's statement. Okay, they've given you the statement from the source. Biko helped to shape a democratic South Africa in the context of the role of the Black consciousness movement in the 1970s. So this question is asking you to determine the role played by the movement in the struggle against apartheid in the 70s. Now remember, in the previous question, we looked at the fact that the ANC had already been banned, which means that the Black consciousness movement was able to fill that vacuum, to close the gap that had been created by the banning of the political parties. They were able to revive political activity. They were able to inspire young people to get involved in political activity as well. So it's all those things that we underlined when we were looking at that written source, and including your own knowledge, because you are making a comment there. It's your own comment. So it's the significance of Mandela's statement that Biko helped to shape a democratic South Africa. Now let's quickly look at the likely responses you can come up with. He mobilized the youth into action against apartheid. I've already told you that young people were inspired by these new ideas. The formation of BCM filled the political vacuum in South Africa. That is the gap I told you about. Biko initiated the formation of student organizations to oppose apartheid. That comes from your own knowledge because it's not directly from the source. He motivated blacks not to fear and remove their feeling of inferiority. That is directly from the source. He played a key role in dismantling apartheid. That is there as well because Nelson Mandela ended his statement by saying that. The next question is, explain the message that the poster conveys. I'm going to quickly circle that because it's very, very important. Now, remember, I told you that that poster, because it was created, it's not like a photograph that only captured the moment. It means that there was an intention. There was a message behind it. So you need to find that message. Now, remember, before the ad break, that is where I was circling there, breaking of the chains and the fact that Steve Biko was already dead. So you need to look at all those visual clues to find the message. And if you're struggling with the visual source given, you need to look at your caption as well, because remember, it is part of your analysis. It is there to help you understand the source. Okay. So it says, explain the message that the poster conveys about Biko's legacy. So in other words, what he left behind. Okay. The impact that he had on South African politics or the struggle against apartheid. And then the likely responses there are to stand up and fight against oppression. We know that from the written source as well, but mostly from the visual source. Because remember, I told you that those two sources work hand in hand. One was showing it in a written form, and then the other one was showing it in a visual form. Mental emancipation, that is what it was about, the psychological liberation of black people, that they shouldn't feel inferior. To break the chains of oppression against apartheid. Now remember that I circled where the chains have been broken, that those things symbolized two things. You can analyze them in two ways, that the BCM was about breaking those shackles of inferiority that black people had been born into, because that came, the years of indoctrination came from when the first white people came to South Africa. And Biko was saying the movement had to teach black people to do away with those feelings. And I said, again, another way of looking at it is to say Biko had broken free because he was no longer oppressed, because he was no longer alive. And then any other relevant response. When they say any other relevant response, they mean response related to the source. Please make sure that you focus on your visual source as the question has instructed you to do. And then if we move on to question 5, to what extent would you agree with Mandela's views on Biko's contribution to the liberation struggle? Okay, we've partly looked at that And again, it's you look at your mark allocation, it's 2 times 2 equals 4. So there you expected to give it 2 points. Please make sure that you don't just give 1 point or more than 2 points, because then you'll be wasting your own time there. Okay. So let's look at the likely response you expected to give there. Apartheid was an evil system. We already know that. It led to black servitude. That is what the chains symbolize there, that black people had to break free of that. Both Mandela and Biko condemned apartheid. Biko's black consciousness contributed to the demise of apartheid or any other response. So you can agree or disagree. If you're disagreeing with that information, then you can say internal and external pressures in the 1980s led to the fall of apartheid. Because remember earlier on, we did look at the fact that apartheid did not end with the formation of the movement in 1968 or with the death of Steve Biko in 1977, which means that there were other factors that contributed to the end of apartheid in South Africa. So in other words, they're testing your own knowledge, so you need to apply that own knowledge in the context of the sources we analyzed before the ad break to say that yes, they did make a contribution. However, apartheid did not end then. It took a long time and other people to also make their own contributions. That is very important, because that is how you analyze sources in context. Okay. And then it also says that collapse of communism forced both the ANC and the National Party to negotiate a peaceful settlement. Again, that was another reason for the end of apartheid. Because remember, in history, we have something called causation, where we look at the different factors contributed to a particular event. It's never one thing that leads to something. When you're looking at cause and effect, it's always a combination of those factors. So in other words, we're saying it wasn't just Steve Biko and black consciousness. Even though he was very important, yes, he did make a huge contribution. However, there were other factors that came into play as well. Okay, so that is what happened. Biko and his black consciousness brought no change in the 1970s. Again, we've already said that apartheid did not end in the 70s. The UDF and the trade unions brought the apartheid government to its knees. That is the 1980s, or any other relevant response. Please make sure that if you get a question like that asking you to what extent, just choose one side. Don't do both. I've given you 2 sides here, one where you can agree and use the information to agree, and the other one where you can disagree. So you need to choose a position. Okay. If you decide to choose both, then you need to show that you are saying, well, to a large extent, it did contribute. However, there were other factors. It has to be very, very clear where you stand in terms of your analysis. Okay, you can't be unsure and say, I agree and I disagree. No. Yes, I agree to some extent. However, I can disagree as well because of all these points that we have mentioned. So it's very important to take a position. It's very similar to the question we did earlier on, where we were looking at justification. So if you get a question like that asking you if something is justified or not, make sure that you say whether it's justified or it's not, or if you feel that it's justified to some extent, then you need to say that with giving evidence. Obviously, it's very important in history to always support the points that you are making. You can't just make emotive statements that are baseless. Evidence is very important because that is what history is about. So you can say, yes, you know, this was justified because of 1, 2, 3, and then you state all those reasons. However, it can be unjustified as well because of this and that and that. Don't just leave it at not justified or justified and that's it. You always have to give evidence. The same way as with this question where you agree or disagree, you always have to give evidence. If you say you agree, state the reasons why you agree. If you disagree, again, you need to state the reasons why you disagree. I hope that has helped you understand the written and the visual sources. We are going to take another quick ad break, and when we come back, we are going to carry on with a different theme. I'm going to hand over to Queen now. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mamsi. So guys, let's take a quick ad break. Don't go anywhere. We're still here and we will see you after the ad break. Welcome back, guys. You are still tuned in with us on the History Paper 2 live revision show. Now, before we get back into things, we are actually currently sitting on 99,622 likes on our Facebook page. Now, that is really, really amazing. But we want to reach 100,000 followers. But we're also going to be giving away airtime. If you guys can give us the correct date, time, and day of when do you think we will be reaching those 100,000 followers. If you guys guess correctly, you could win yourself some airtime. So it's easy and simple as that. Get entering, get guessing. All you have to do is register on Curio. More details are on our Facebook page. So let's continue with the show.
Okay, thanks so much, Queen. Before we look at these sources, I understand that there was a question about paragraph writing.
Yes,
We got that question.
Yes, we
Yes.
do have the question. Fundiswa, I think, yes, Fundiswa Ngema wanted to know, when it comes to discussing all the sources in 8 lines, how can she go about doing that, discussing the sources problem in a matter of 8 lines?
Okay, thanks for that question, Fundiswa. What you're expected to do there is to summarize the sources. Please make sure that you don't repeat all the information that is in the sources. So in other words, you find out the information that is similar in all those sources, and then you come up with your own summary in your own words. So those paragraph questions are designed to test your summary skills, okay, how well you can summarize the questions and how well you can put those or that information in the sources in your own words. Okay, I hope that has helped you answer the question. If, for whatever reason, you write a bit more than 8 lines, let's say 10 or 12 lines, don't stress, because they are not really phased about, you know, the 12 lines. The 8 lines is just a guide to say to you, don't write a page long or 2 pages, just write a short summary. But some people have very big handwriting. They can write 12 lines. Some people can say that in 7 lines, not even 8 lines, as long as you have looked at all the sources and you have been able to summarize them in your own words. I hope that has helped you. Okay, now let's carry on with our sources. We're now looking at the different types of sources. The following source comprises of 2 extracts. I'm going to quickly underline that because it's very important. So you need to know that there are 2 extras which focus on different views. So what this tells you is that these sources are on the same thing, but they have different views and feelings. Okay, I'm going to underline feelings as well, on the issue of amnesty. So we are looking at the TRC, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. You already know that different people in South Africa viewed the TRC in different light. Okay, so that is why we are looking at 2 different views. Obviously, there were people who agreed with it, and there were other people who disagreed with it. Okay, now let's look at viewpoint 1. And the caption tells you that the extract deals with the testimony of Philip, so this is a primary source, and it also tells you that he was a perpetrator. Okay, so in other words, he is the one who actually committed the crime. And he was granted amnesty. And then it goes on to say, Philip, an agent of apartheid, that means he was working for the apartheid government, sought amnesty for setting off a bomb. That is what he did. During the apartheid times, he set off a bomb that killed several innocent people. Okay, I'm going to underline innocent. At his amnesty hearing, the families of the victims were allowed to tell how the bombing had affected their lives. Philip then told his version. Okay, this is very important because that is what the TRC was about. It was about both the victims and perpetrators coming forward and telling their stories. So the perpetrator, Philip in this case, told his version of the bombing. In reaction to his closure, his family said they were feeling ashamed. Okay, that is one thing that is very important. So that is Philip's family. They were feeling ashamed of what he had done. So in other words, they were like distancing themselves from Philip because they did not agree with what he had done. And his wife subsequently divorced him. So Philip was also affected by what happened during the apartheid times. Okay, so his wife divorced him for what he had done. And what had he done? He had set off a bomb that killed several innocent people. Philip apologized. That is very important, that he apologized, even though showing remorse was not one of the requirements of the TRC. Because remember, the main thing was to just come forward, tell the truth, the whole truth, and prove that their crime was politically motivated. But some people were offended by the fact that the perpetrators did not show any remorse. They did not say they were sorry. But in this case, Philip did apologize to the victims and their families. So he apologized for his actions, and his apology was accepted by the families of the victims. He was then granted amnesty. So obviously, by being granted amnesty, it means that he had told the whole truth and they had proved that his crime was politically motivated. Okay, afterwards, the families of the victims were given financial compensation. That is very important. So what happened was that, I'll use a different color there, that Philip was granted amnesty. Okay, that is a perpetrator there. So I'll just write P there for the perpetrator. And then the families of the victims were given financial compensation. So both parties, I'll just write V here for victims, okay, both the parties who came before the TRC got things from the TRC. The perpetrator got amnesty, and the families or the victims' families were given financial compensation by the government for the loss of their loved ones. Okay, so that is viewpoint 1. Now let's look at viewpoint 2. Again, it is very important to read the caption. The extract deals with the victims. Now remember, the first extract we've read about Philip was about the perpetrators, but this one is about the victims. So that is the difference between the two sources. Because remember, when we started, I told you that we were looking at the different viewpoints on the TRC. Okay, so the extract deals with victims who were against the granting of amnesty. That's another very important point, that these people were against the granting of amnesty. So in the first source, the families of the victims supported the granting of amnesty. They even accepted Philip's apology. But in this case, these people did not agree with the granting of amnesty. Now let's look at the reasons why. Let's look for the reasons why they did not agree with the granting of amnesty. It is true that there have been other victims who have rejected the notion of reconciliation and amnesty, who insisted on retributive justice. I'm going to underline that. Those are the terms you need to know, because remember, as part of your studying, okay, you need to know all the concepts related to all your themes. So you know that the TRC was about restorative justice. That is why they were granting amnesty to people, okay? But these people wanted retributive justice, and you will see that later on there will be a question asking you the meaning of retributive justice. So if you don't understand the meaning, the caption is there to help you, because it already says that these people were against the granting of amnesty. So obviously they wanted the perpetrators to be punished. So it's very important to read things in context, because remember, in the exam room, you will not be allowed a dictionary, so you won't be able to go and look up the meaning of the word, even though you should know this word after having done the TRC in class. But let's say, just for argument's sake, you don't know it, make sure that you can go back to the caption, because it will help you understand it, and also you read everything in context. That is another important thing. So, and who insisted on the punishment? That is another clue. So if you don't know the meaning of retributive justice, you can see the word punishment there of perpetrators for their apartheid era crimes. we can count amongst these the Mqenges. So they're giving you the examples of the families, okay, who came before the TRC and they were not happy with the perpetrators being granted amnesty. The Seremanes and some of the women of the Kulumani group. So these are the three examples. So I'll just number them 1, 2, 3. These are the three examples of the families who were against the granting of amnesty. Some had qualified their attitude by saying that they cannot find it in themselves to be reconciled with the perpetrators who did not reveal the details. So they're giving reasons why they were against this amnesty. It's because the perpetrators, those people who had committed the crimes, did not reveal the whole truth of their atrocities committed. And those who refused to give their testimonies, okay, that's another thing. Some of them refused to give their testimonies, and some had showed no remorse. That is a very important thing, that even though it was not a TRC requirement to show remorse, some family members expected the perpetrators to say they were sorry. And that was the only way then people could be reconciled. People could move forward and forgive the perpetrators for having committed those crimes. Okay, so in this case, they were saying the reason why they did not support the granting of amnesty was because the perpetrators did not reveal the whole truth. They did not give them the full details. And another problem was that they did not gave their testimonies. Some of them refused to stand before the TRC, and others did not show any remorse. So in other words, they still said what we did was justified because it was apartheid, we were just doing our job, instead of saying to the families, we are very sorry, we acknowledge the fact that you were hurt or you suffered because of what we did. So they're saying those are the reasons why they did not support the granting of amnesty. Let's read on. Okay, if we move on, it says some have stated that they cannot be reconciled with the violators of human rights who have appeared before the TRC, but have peppered, that means overloaded, the hearings with lies, denials, and obfuscations or confusion of the truth. So in other words, they're saying that these people who have stood before the TRC have not told the truth. They just went to the TRC and they told a lot of lies. They confused the families because remember, the aim of the TRC was to reveal the truth about what happened. That is the reason why these families, remember the three families, the Mqenges, the Seremanes, and members of the Kulumani group, were saying, no, we don't agree with the granting of amnesty because these people are not telling the truth. They're not showing any remorse for what they did, in case of those who did tell the truth, but they didn't say they were sorry for what they did. And in some cases, some of these people who had committed the crimes even refused to go and stand before the TRC. Okay, so those are the two different views that we've looked at. We've looked at the first one, remember, that was the one by, if I can just quickly scroll up, it was about Philip, who was an agent of apartheid, and how he was also affected, okay, because his family obviously disowned him because they felt ashamed, and his wife divorced him. That is how he was affected. So he came forward and he showed remorse, even though that was not a requirement, and then the families of the victims were able to forgive him. They accepted his apology because he said he was sorry. But then, in this case, these families are saying that according to their experiences, they have not had positive experiences from the TRC hearings. And it's all the things that we've looked at, that the people did not reveal the truth, and they also spread lies, okay, that is part of not revealing the truth. And in some cases, people refused to even step forward and give their testimonies to the TRC, and in some cases, the people refused to show remorse. So these three families underlined and numbered show that if the perpetrators had done those things, then they would have accepted the granting of amnesty by the TRC. So these are the justifications. I'm going to quickly write here justifications in a different color. So they're giving the reasons. I'm just going to write reasons why they did not support the granting of amnesty by the TRC. So if you analyze your sources like this, It's going to help you when you go to your questions, because that will save you a lot of time. You'll go straight to the source and you'll find your answer there. As you can see, I've already numbered, I've underlined things, and I've labeled different things as well. So what we'll do after the ad break, we're going to look at the type of questions you're likely to get on this section. I'm going to hand over to you, Queen.
All right, guys, let's take the ad break. We'll see you after this. Welcome back, guys. Hope you guys are ready and refreshed to continue with the History Live Revision Show. Now, we've also got a few questions from you guys on our social media pages, and we've got one from Lerato, and he wants to know, Mamsi, what is a blanket amnesty? He'd also like to know what the term witch hunt means, because it seems like it appeared in their prep exams.
Okay, thank you so much. Thanks for those questions, Lerato. I'll start with the blanket amnesty one. The blanket amnesty one refers to the amnesty that was just given to all the people without consulting the victims' families, and also in some cases it was the amnesty given to people even if they did not qualify. In other words, they did not fulfill all the criteria as stipulated by the TRC. Remember, before the ad break, I said that people had to reveal the whole truth, and they had to prove that crimes were politically motivated, the crimes that they had committed during the apartheid times. But then the victims and their families felt that in some cases, people were given amnesty even though they had not fulfilled all the criteria stated by the TRC. And also, in terms of granting that amnesty, the families had not been consulted. It was just the commissioners themselves who made the decisions on their own. Okay. So I hope that answers the first question. And then the second question was about the witch hunt. So now you remember that when we were looking at the different viewpoints of the TRC, we said that different people viewed the TRC in different ways. There were people who supported this whole notion or idea of reconciliation and nation building, and there were other people who viewed the TRC as a witch hunt. That means that they were saying that the TRC was not about forgiveness or reconciling the nation in order for it to move forward, like building the rainbow nation, but it was about exposing people. That is what a witch hunt is about. It's like you are hunting for a witch. So you are naming and shaming people instead of just finding out the truth and moving forward as a nation. So I hope that has helped you understand the term witch hunt. So that comes from those people who did not support the whole process of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Okay.
All right, there you have it, Lerato. I hope it answered your question very nice and clear.
Thank you so much, Queen. Now, remember before the break, we looked at those different viewpoints, and it's very nice that they do relate to the questions that Lerato asked. Now, let's look at the questions you're likely to get from those sources. Now, remember, there will be a combination of comprehension questions where you just have to extract information from the source, and some of them will be application questions where you need to apply your knowledge, okay? Because obviously you can't walk into an exam if you have not studied the theme. As I said before, when we were looking at retributive justice, I said those are the things you need to know even before you write your exam. So let's look at the different types of questions. It says, why according to viewpoint one? Now, this is very important. It's not according to you, it's not according to your own knowledge, but you have to refer to viewpoint one. So why, according to viewpoint one, did Philip appear before the TRC? That is for 1 mark. It's a straight extraction of information. He wanted amnesty, and he was granted that amnesty. Okay, that was his whole reason for coming before the TRC. And then the next question says, use evidence from the source and your own knowledge. This is another important instruction. So you're using two things here. You're using the source and your own knowledge. As I said to you before, that you are not just analyzing these sources in isolation, but you are supposed to have done your work, to have studied, so that you understand and analyze these sources in context. So that is where your own knowledge comes in. So you're using those two things, source and your own knowledge, to explain how the objectives of the TRC, I'm quickly going to underline that as well. So it's the aims or objectives of the TRC are mentioned in viewpoint 1. Okay, 2 times 2 equals 4. Again, the mark allocation should guide you as to how many points you're supposed to give here. The victims were allowed to tell their perpetrators how the atrocities affected them, because both the victims and perpetrators appeared before the TRC. That is very important. The perpetrators got a chance to tell their stories. The perpetrators then applied for amnesty. Like, remember, that is what we were looking at in the first question, that the reason why Philip stood before the TRC was to seek amnesty. The victims' families forgave the perpetrators. So it was both sides. This was not a one-sided process. Both the victims and perpetrators were allowed the opportunity to tell their stories. So in the case of the perpetrators, to say what they did, why they did it, to prove that it was politically motivated, and in the case of the victims, to say how they were affected by what was done to them or their families. Okay, the victims' families forgave the perpetrators. The victims' families received compensation. That's another thing we found from that first viewpoint about Philip. And any other relevant response, remember, because information is coming from both the source and your own knowledge. Now let's look at the next question. It says, explain the difference between restorative and retributive justice. Now remember, I underlined this when we were looking at the source earlier on, when we were analyzing the source. So what is the difference between these two types? I told you that the TRC was a form of restorative justice, whereas some people, especially the victims or their families, felt that the TRC should have been retributive. In other words, it should have punished the people. So you need to explain those differences in your own words, because the explanation will not necessarily be found in the source. Now let's look at the response there. Remember, the mark allocation is 2 times 2 equals 4. That means you're getting 2 marks for restorative and 2 marks for retributive. So restorative justice spent on repairing the harm caused by political crime. So in other words, it's part of reconciliation, that you're building the nation and you're rehabilitating both the victims and the perpetrators so that they can move forward. Whereas retributive justice is bent on punishment for crimes committed. Remember, when we were looking at that second viewpoint, we said some family members wanted the perpetrators to be punished for what they had done. They did not want what the TRC was about, which was to restore people's humanity. There's even a point where the chairman of the TRC, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, said that the TRC was important, and some victims' families as well say that it was very important because it was able to restore people's humanity. Okay, so that is where that comes from, that the TRC was about restorative justice, whereas some people wanted retributive justice. I hope that has helped you. Okay, and then the next question is comment on the reasons. Very important. It's not the results, but the reasons why some people were not willing to forgive the perpetrators. Again, we did underline all those reasons when we analyzed our source. You just need to give 1 point. So it's 1 times 2 equals 2. Okay, so there are different options here. Some did not reveal the full details of the atrocities. Some refused to testify before the TRC. Some perpetrators showed no remorse for the crimes they committed. They favored retributive justice system or any other relevant response. So that comes from viewpoint 2. Remember, when we are analyzing that source, I did highlight those sections where they were giving reasons why, the families were giving reasons why they did not support the granting of amnesty. These are the reasons they gave, that some people did not reveal the whole truth, some refused to stand before the TRC, and some did not show any remorse. And then they also allow for any other relevant response. Obviously, it has to be relevant. According to viewpoint 2, so again, this question points you to viewpoint 2. Please make sure you don't go to viewpoint 1. Identify 3 families that were against the granting of amnesty to perpetrators. And so you've got the instruction here that you need to give the 3 families, but the mark allocation also tells you that it's 3 times 1 equals 3. Now remember, those are the families are underlined and I put the numbers above them. Now let's look at the responses there. The Mqenges, the Seremanés, and the Kulumani group. That is the straight extraction from the source. It's very straightforward. And then the next question, explain whether the stance taken by those families, in other words, the above families that we've mentioned, the 3 families, and those who supported retributive justice can be justified. Supply reasons for your answer. So these people, the families we read about, did not support restorative justice. They supported, it tells you here, who supported retributive justice can be justified. Okay, and again, you need to supply reasons for your answer. So you need to give 2 points there. It's 2 times 2 equals 4. So were they justified or not? Now remember, we've looked at a question before where they've asked you if things were justified or not. So it's really up to you how you analyze the situation. So you can say things were justified or they were not justified. The most important thing is the type of evidence you give to show or to support the stance you've taken. Now let's look at the possible responses there. If you say that this view or the reasons were justified, then you say people must be punished for their crimes. It's not okay for people to just get away with the crimes that they commit. They need to learn that there is punishment or there are consequences for crimes committed. Perpetrators cannot get away with murder. I've already said that. The victims could not be denied justice. So in other words, justice had to work both ways. It had to be for both the perpetrators and the victims. So those people felt that it was not fair that it was only the perpetrators who were shown justice, but the victims were not, because they obviously had a different view of justice. Okay, and the perpetrators had to be held responsible for their crimes or any other relevant response. So if you choose not justified, because you can choose that, remember I said to you, it's really up to you which side you choose. You can choose justified or not justified as long as you give relevant reasons for that, because in the question you're asked to give reasons for those or for your answer. So if your answer is no, they were not justified, then you need to say that they did not understand the aims of the TRC. Now remember, when we started looking at these sources, I told you that the aim of the TRC, or one of the aims, was not to punish people. The aim was to uncover the truth, because most of South Africa's past was hidden from the people. So they wanted to know what had happened during the apartheid times, and then they wanted to reconcile the nation. So in other words, they wanted both the victims and the perpetrators to come together to reconcile so that the nation could move forward. The aim was to build this rainbow nation. So these families who did not support this restorative justice, the bringing together of people, the granting of amnesty, they obviously did not understand the aims of the TRC. And that is why they then criticized it. So that is the first point. They aimed at repairing the damage caused by apartheid. Again, I've already told you that that was the aim of the TRC. It was to reconcile people. As I said before, that it was to restore people's humanity. So the assertion from the commissioners was that even if you were a perpetrator, you were still human. You still had human rights. Therefore, you had to be protected by this commission, provided that you came forward, you told the whole truth, okay, and you also proved that the crimes committed were politically motivated. Then you will be protected from prosecution. That means you will be granted amnesty. And then another point is they attempted to restore human rights culture. That is the point I've just mentioned now, that in the new South Africa, human rights were a big thing. If you read our constitution, you will see that human rights underpin our constitution. That is the reason why we don't have a death penalty in our country, because even if you are a perpetrator, the assertion or the understanding is that you are still human. in other words, you should be allowed the opportunity to be rehabilitated. So your humanity needs to be restored, and that is what the TRC was about. So therefore, that is why you could say that these families who did not support this restorative justice and they wanted the perpetrators to be punished, obviously did not understand what the TRC was about. They did not understand what their aims were, and they also did not understand this whole concept of the rainbow nation, the moving forward of a nation as one, and supporting people's human rights. And then they also allow for any other relevant response, provided it's relevant. Don't forget that. Okay, we're going to take another quick commercial break, and when we come back, we're going to look at a different theme, which is a new world order, and then we'll do some essay questions as well.
Okay, guys, so don't go anywhere. As you've heard, Mamsi said that there's still some work that needs to be covered, so we'll see you after the ad break. Welcome back, guys. You are still tuned in with us, and it is the History Live Revision Show for Paper 2. Now, we're in the last segment of the show, so if you've just joined us, just go onto our Facebook page. We've posted the notes there, then you can catch up on what you might have missed on. But, Mamsi, you mentioned that we'll be doing some essays for now.
Yes, okay, thanks, Queen.
Right.
What we'll do for this segment is we're going to look at the New World Order. We're going to analyze the two sources, because I feel it's very important to look at that section as well, seeing we've looked at the other sections. And then we'll look at the essays. If we don't get to your essay, because remember there's a choice, you get to choose which essay question to answer. You can look at the notes, because the notes are there on the Facebook page, and the memos as well. So don't stress if you don't get to your question. What is very important is the skills that I'm going to give you in terms of essay writing and analyzing questions. Okay, so let's carry on. Now, remember I told you before the ad break that we are now looking at the New World Order, and the types of sources will be similar to the sources we've already looked at, but obviously on a different theme or section. So again, it's very important to read the caption. It says the source below consists of a written and a visual source. So we're looking at the two types of sources, the written one and a visual one, and it deals with the causes, going to circle that because it's very important, and the consequences of globalization. Now, remember I told you that we're now looking at a new world order. We're done with the coming of democracy in South Africa and coming to terms with the past, that is the TRC. We're now looking at globalization. Now, the caption has already told you that both these sources, the written one and the visual one, are dealing with the causes and the consequences of globalization. Now, let's see. We're going to read the source together and see if you can find those. So we're starting with the written source. This extract describes the growth of international corporations in the late 20th century. Now you will know that another name of these international corporations, I refer to them as the multinational corporations, the MNCs, or in some cases, the TNCs, the transnational corporations. So don't get confused when you see those words. And then remember the caption did say that we're looking at the causes and consequences. A major cause of globalization is the growth of large companies. So they give you that it is the growth of large companies searching for economies of scale. This is when a company produces goods more cheaply. It's very important, by producing them in bulk. So these multinational corporations are producing goods in bulk. Economies of scale means that large companies can be more profitable than smaller ones. Okay, these are companies so large that they are not located in any one country. Hence the term multinational corporations, MNCs, or TNCs, as I said to you before, because they are found in different countries. In the 1960s, these corporations accounted for around 17% of world trade. In other words, they were dominant. However, in recent years, this figure has grown rapidly. Approximately 200 transnational corporations, there is that term there that I told you about earlier on. I'm going to use a different color now, the T and Cs, now dominate 32% of world trade. So these are found in different countries and they dominate. Now let's look at the visual source. Okay, again, the caption is very important because it tells you what the source is about. Says this poster, again, it's a poster. It means it was made. It's not like a photograph. Okay, I'm going to quickly underline that it is a poster. So you need to know that it obviously carries a particular message. It shows the power that the multinational corporations, let me use a different color, the power that the multinational corporations had in America and on the rest of the world. The stars on the American flag have been replaced by the logos of the multinational companies. Now, this should be the most recognizable flag. You know, this is an American flag, and in this part of the American flag, what you normally find are the different stars that represent the different American states. Now, the person who drew this poster put the logos of the different companies, the multinational corporations, instead of the different states represented by the stars. Now, remember, when you look at the American flag, and the reason why the different states are represented there, you should know from your grade 11 work, looking at the rise of the United States, that the different states are represented in Washington, D.C., because America runs under a federal system of government, which means that the government in Washington, D.C. makes decisions that have to do with the entire country. However, the different states still have the power to make decisions that pertain to their own states, that affect their own states. Okay, they have a lot of power. That is why they're represented in the American flag. But the message that this cartoonist wanted to portray was that instead of those states just making those decisions, it is now these big companies, these multinational corporations that are influencing even the political decisions that are made by the government and the country that affect the whole world, because you will know that the end of the Cold War led to the dominance of the United States. So that is the message of this poster, which can easily be described as a cartoon as well because it was drawn, but it is a poster in this case that the stars have been replaced by the logos of the companies, and the caption does tell you that it shows the power that the multinational corporations have had or had in America and the rest of the world. Okay, I hope you understand these two sources. Now let's look at the type of questions you're likely to get there. So we've read the written source and we've looked at that poster. Question 1 says, use information from the source and your own knowledge and explain the term globalization. You're explaining it in your own words. Remember, it might be given in a source in a different way, but you need to explain it in your own words using information from the source. It's the movement of people, information, investments, goods, and services around the world. People and countries become increasingly interconnected politically, economically, and culturally, and they allow any relevant answer or explanation. And then the next question is, what, according to the source, was the major cause of globalization? That is straight extraction from the source. It should be very easy. I underlined it when we're analyzing that source. It's the growth of large companies. And then the next question is, you need to quote. Remember, we've looked at the question where you're asked to quote. Please make sure that you do that. You don't use your own knowledge. You need to quote evidence from the source that supports the notion or belief that large companies, that is the transnational corporations, benefit from globalization. I'm quickly going to underline that. Okay. They've already told you that they benefit from globalization. You just need to find evidence that proves that. Okay. They are more profitable than smaller ones. It's in the source. They accounted for 17% of world trade. 200 transnational corporations now dominate 32% of world trade. Again, that is straight from the source. And then the next question is, using your own knowledge, now using your own knowledge, explain what other factors contributed to the process of globalization. It's not in the source. Advanced technology in travel made distance irrelevant. Internet also contributed. The disappearance of borders, it means it was easier for people to move around. Greater movement and migration of people. Those are all the things that helped globalization to spread. And then the last question is, identify any 4 transnational companies, large companies, that sell global brands all over the world. Use the visual clues from the source to support your answer. That means you have to know the logos of those different companies that were in that American flag. Okay, these are just some of the examples. I'm not going to read all of them because you will know them. The obvious ones are Coca-Cola and McDonald's. Those you will know. Okay. So 4 times 1 equals 4. That means you need to give 4. And I'm sure most of you will know. Sorry, that was not the last question. The next question was, how does the visual source support the written source regarding globalization? That means these sources work hand in hand. They support each other. So you need to find the similarities. If you get a question asking you how a source supports the other source, that means find the similarities. And then the answer there, they mentioned large companies. The written source shows that large companies produce goods in bulk, and the visual source shows these big famous companies. So they work hand in hand. And then our last short question is, explain whether the visual source would be biased to an historian. Large companies controlled the USA. Large companies controlled the US policies. It shows that the designer is against multinational corporations that not only control US but also the world. You know that because instead of the flags, the stars of the different states, he has put the multinational corporations, so he is obviously not portraying them in a good light. So he is obviously biased. Okay. Now let's quickly move on to our essays. As I said to you, we will not have time to look at each and every essay, but what is important is the skills. Because remember, you are not going to get the exact questions in tomorrow's paper. But what is important is you analyze the question, make sure you understand exactly what you expected to do, and also when you're writing your essay should have an introduction which gives scope and direction your argument is going to take. Okay, and you need to divide your body of your essay into paragraphs. 1 idea, 1 paragraph. Please don't jumble up your ideas, put different ideas in the same paragraph. That will obviously lose you a lot of marks. And also another thing that helps is to use linking words. So when you're moving from one idea to the next, it's very important to make the link. So you can say furthermore, in addition. Or if you're presenting an opposing point of view, you're going to say, on the other hand. However, okay, it's very important to use those linking words because then your essay flows. And then a very important thing is the conclusion. Make sure that you don't run out of time, that your essay has all those different structures, the components to it, the introduction, the body divided into paragraphs, and the conclusion where you sum up your main points. Please don't include new information in the conclusion. If there's anything that has not been discussed in the essay, it cannot be in the conclusion because the conclusion is there to sum up the main points. Now, in terms of analyzing your essay questions, you will get different types of questions, and that will obviously guide the choice. Okay, which essay you choose. In some cases, you'll get a straightforward question like this. Explain it to what extent. This is very important. To what extent? That means you have to take a stance. When I read your introduction, I need to see the extent. You need to say to a large extent, to some extent, or to a small extent. That is very important. Internal resistance in South Africa succeeded in dismantling apartheid during the 1980s. These are your parameters. You are not writing about South Africa in the 1990s, but you are looking at South Africa in the 1980s. Okay, again, I'm not going to look at the possible response. You will find that in the notes that are on our Facebook page. And then in other instances, you will get an essay question where you are given a statement. and then a question based on that statement, like this one. Says the road to a new democratic South Africa between 1990 and 1994. So this is where you discuss the 1990s. So they've given you the beginning and the end part of the essay, was smooth and without hiccups. Evaluate the validity of this statement and support your argument with relevant historical evidence. So in the body of your essay, when you're arguing in support or when you're against this point, because you can agree or disagree depending on the type of evidence you have, you need to keep referring to this statement given here, because it is given to you for a reason. Please don't just ignore it. Don't just go and write an essay on the 1990s without referring to this statement given. So as I said to you, there'll be different types of questions. Some will say to you, discuss the following. Some will say, to what extent? And in this case, you are evaluating the validity of this statement. That is why it is important not to ignore that statement. Please keep referring to it in the body of your essay. Even in your introduction and conclusion, you have to refer to the statement. Again, I will not look at the possible answers there because those are found in the page. And then if you look at the last essay question, it says, critically discuss how the collapse of communism and the USSR paved the way for negotiations between the ANC and the apartheid government after 1989. So again, you are asked to critically discuss, okay, and you, with a special focus, you're looking at the end of apartheid, but with a special focus on the collapse of the USSR. Okay, collapse of communism and the USSR. So you're looking at the impact of the collapse of the USSR in the move to democracy in South Africa. Again, I will not show you the possible answers there because they are found on the page, because remember, these are not the exact questions you will get, but the aim was just to show you how different questions get asked. But don't forget that if you choose a question where there is a statement, you cannot ignore that statement. You need to keep referring to it. I hope today's lesson has helped you, and there will be a repeat. Please look out for the repeats so that you can obviously enhance your own understanding and knowledge so that you do very well in the exam. I wish you all the best, and I'm sure you're all going to do well tomorrow. Good luck.
All right. Thank you so much, Mamsi. You've been a great help, and we've also been receiving some positive feedback on the page from the Mindsetters. And I'd like to read a few. Tabiso says that thank you so much. You are a really great help, Mamsi. And we also have a comment from Caesar, who says, thank you so much. I at least now understand better how to analyze or differentiate sources. Hashtag history. So guys, there you have it. We have done our part. Now it is all up to you to do your part and make sure that you are well prepared for the exam tomorrow. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is all from us. Remember, you can catch the repeats, and goodbye.